Hello, friends. Before we begin, we'd like to remind you that next Tuesday, June 16th, is the launch day of our book, A Dash of Demon, Aquilo Book 1. And we're doing an online event at twitch.tv/Daniora, Daniora, to celebrate. Please join us. We'll be playing games and answering all sorts of questions. Also, if you're in the New England area, we're doing an in-person launch on Friday the 19th at Copper Dog Books in Beverly, Massachusetts, starting at 7 p.m. It's the first time you can meet both of us in the flesh and get your book signed and listen to Amy read a passage from the book live. And now, on to the story. Aquilo, Season 9, Chapter 5, Kill Her. I remember the first time I made bread. Not just followed the recipe, mixing instant yeast, flour, sugar, salt, and water, and then letting it all rise before baking. Rather, when I stopped to really understand each of the steps I was taking. At the time, I was particularly fascinated with the process of feeding, growing, and then killing a whole fungal colony just so I could make a few baguettes. Applying violence through kneading, stretching, folding, and pressing dough with the purpose of manipulating its protein structure to define the final product's texture. Everything I did felt both like rigorous science and wondrous magic. What an advanced form of cooking bread requires. Slight differences in measurements and temperatures of the same ingredients will yield wildly different results. It's the oldest form of prepared food, and it's difficult to imagine such a variety of strange preparation methods being discovered in the first place, let alone several times over human history. Every culture has its own version of bread, from flat naan to pillowy milk bread. Each branch growing from this common trunk made of flour, water, and yeast. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't my favorite part of cooking. The complexity and history is enthralling, but I'm far more attracted by the more human magic, the effect food has on people. I wouldn't be caught dead in a kitchen laboratory, experimenting and creating new concoctions without ever seeing their effect. But that moment, when I was confronted by the dual complexity and simplicity of bread, stands out as a pivot point in my interpretation of what it means to cook, or bake if we're going to split hairs about it. Closing and opening the fingers in my right hand, feeling newly stitched skin stretch and release in the process, I'm faced with a new version of that experience. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have understood. I'd have been like that Miriam following a recipe to make bread. No. I'd have been making a sandwich, simply happy that bread exists to hold my pastrami, roasted eggplant, and goat cheese together. Without the experience of baking cakes that soothe the dead and cooking treats to feed the damned, this would have been a miracle outside of my grasp. I traced the veins on the back of my right hand with the fingers of my left, reverse engineering what just happened. I don't know the exact ingredients, and I can't guess at the precise recipe, but I get the general idea. I can't exactly make a focaccia, but I know that this is bread.
Ah,
The old witch across the counter breathes out. She leans in to look at her handiwork, then back at my face, locking eyes.
you're putting it together, aren't you?
Timid, I nod. As the pieces of the magic I just experienced start to fall into place, I find myself less intimidated by the crone's power. Oh, she certainly outdoes me in the craft, of that there is no doubt. She walked into an unfamiliar kitchen and whipped up a healing brew in minutes. Would have taken me hours to concoct a drink just to soothe the pain. But at least I can see the mechanisms of her power. The dough rises because of gases resulting from the fermentation process as it proofs. There's an apparatus behind the magic, and I can see enough of it. Not that I don't fear Philomene Dufour. Besides her obvious skill and knowledge, I know what she's capable of, and that's what makes her a threat. A predator isn't only dangerous because of its claws and fangs, but also because it kills as a matter of fact, as a means of survival. Philomen's hands are soaked in blood. What would a few more drops matter?
To be honest,
The witch continues,
I'm surprised it works so well. Your spices are a long way from home, and your ingredients lack soul. Had I gathered them, that scar would be much smaller, if it remained at all.
She takes the bowl between her long, gnarled fingers, lifting it to her nose. Her features distort at the smell, wrinkling like a ball of paper unfolding. From the corner of my eye, I see a couple walking down the street, just outside the large window of the Aquilo Cafe. I think that's Jennifer and Edward. Neither are regulars, but they drop by once in a while, usually during the summer. I know them mostly from the market where Edward sells honey. They look inside, but it's a throwaway glance. Insufficient to recognize my distress. Besides, what would they make of this scene? How much peril can there be in serving an old woman after closing hours? Looking over my shoulder, I'm reminded of everything that was done in Philomen's name right here in my kitchen. Jennifer and Edward disappeared from view, laughing at some private joke between themselves, leaving me with peril aplenty.
What do you want?
I ask, straightening my back and squaring my shoulders. It's an ambitious stance, one meant to push back against the old woman's terrifying nature, but my voice fails to carry my confidence home. If Philomen notices my clumsy attempt at determination, she shows no sign of it. Instead, she looks at her reflection in the coffee machine's brass tube, pursing her lips and furrowing her brow. Unsatisfied with what she finds, her attention returns to my question.
The winds through the branches of Aquilo whispered of your ailment,
she says, neither comforting nor threatening, but something of both.
I came to see about your welfare.
I bite my tongue, perhaps a little too literally. I want to demand how she can claim to care about anyone's welfare after what she's done, or rather, what was done to bring her back to life. What about Veronique Lagasse's welfare, Doris's welfare, or even Trevor? I should be spitting these accusations in her face, but instead I just tighten my jaw and steel my gaze. You were dead, I say, the words spilling out like an accusation. It's hard to say what I expect from her. Retaliation? Denial? Justifications? Maybe I want an apology. Sorry, I killed a few people and built a doorway to literal hell. But that is not what Philomen Dufour is made of. The witch adjusts her long skirts, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. One hand finds the counter, which she uses to steady herself, while the other scratches her chin. Now it's the spoons above the register that seem to have her attention, but she hasn't forgotten about me.
You couldn't be more wrong, daughter. I was never dead. I'm like a frog, I suppose. Too slippery for death's grasp, but once in a while I have to sleep for a season. Frozen under a pond's surface, waiting for fresh spring to thaw me out. I see you remembering the whole mess. It's like a flavor at the back of your mouth, isn't it? That memory.
It's hard to tell whether I was already reliving the moment or it's her words that conjures the visions of the past, but she's right. The copper taste of blood accompanies the memories, along with the pain of a broken arm and the indelible image of quiet carnage in my kitchen.
It's an untidy affair to evade the Reaper this way, to dip below his gaze when he's looking for you. Have you met him?
I nod.
He tends to stop for us Dufour women,
Philomen continues.
My mother used to say it was something good old Melody did, but I agree with Doris. I think he comes for the food. Death is always hungry, after all. Ravenous, insatiable.
I wonder if she might be thinking of the hunger demon. There's something in the intensity of her thin features that belies hate or anger, perhaps even fear. My fingers are still flexing, testing the new skin on my hand, though at this point it's become a means to channel my own terror rather than wonder at the miracle cure. Philomene notices, shakes her head wildly. Her hair is like the branches of a willow, tossed around in the winds of a hurricane. I almost expect leaves to fall from her untamed mane.
Better?
She asks, either to me or to herself. Regardless, I nod again.
I shouldn't be so hard on you,
she continues, pushing away from the counter, age showing through her movements.
You're too much like Doris, and like that friend of yours, the one who thinks she can be a witch of spirits and drinks, starved of focus and knowledge.
She takes my hand again, holding it up to her face. She splays my fingers like the feathers of a peacock. Every fiber of my being demands I pull my hand away, the same way I would after touching a hot stove, but I remain paralyzed. The witch looks pleased, inspecting her handiwork again and again, like an artist drinking in their own masterpiece.
I see it in your eyes,
she continues, still playing with my extremities like they were a unique specimen worthy of study.
You've got that Dufour need to help others, that infuriating hunger to meddle and pry. I know, but how frustrating it must be for you to be so limited.
She puts my hand back on the counter, like one might a mug drunk empty. The rough skin of her fingertip caresses my fresh scar one last time before she finally lets go.
Imagine all you could do, everyone you could save, if you knew just a little more. No longer for you the peddling of minor miracles and simple tricks. Oh, I could elevate you, daughter, raise you up to the level of Doris, or perhaps even Amelia. Claim your place in the Dufour line. Hang your spoon with the others.
Philomene watches, her head tilted just a little. She smiles with thin lips. It's a lizard smile, cold yet hungry. I still don't know what she wants, but as my senses settle, as the fever, the awe, and the fear level out, I can see a pattern. I'll think about it, I mumble, my voice lukewarm and steady. It takes some effort, but even my expression remains flat as I concede nothing. The old witch's smile broadens, and she steeples her fingers close to her chest. She, too, is struggling to maintain a facade. There's a tremor in her lip as she fights to keep her balance.
Family helps family, Miriam,
she says, taking a few careful steps backwards.
Heal. Get better. Study our recipes. I'll be in touch.
With that, she turns around, her skirts flowing dramatically, then makes her exit back into the night. I want to say that I slept poorly that night, that I went up to my apartment fearful of every shadow and worried about every noise. After all, I'd seen the Wicked Witch and spoken to the enemy. She was there, in my cafe. She knows me, knows where I live, and has demonstrated herself to be as powerful as one might fear. Instead, I climbed the steps under an unusual umbrella of calm. The night was damp and cold, otherwise I might have considered going for a walk. I satisfied myself with some homemade hot chocolate and a little reading, one of my trashy romance novels that I've been neglecting for weeks now. I allowed Brioche inside and let her follow me around from the kitchen to the bedroom. She now knows not to climb on the bed unless I wash her paws, but I still prefer that she keep to the floor and couch. When I felt sleep taking me over, just a little before midnight, I took a few minutes to write down a list of things I needed to prepare in the morning. Having a plan saves me time and allows me to pivot faster if I find I'm missing an ingredient or two. No dreams came to bother me, and when I woke up for a glass of water at around 3, I wondered if this was a side effect of the broth Philomene had given me. Even that glimmer of paranoia failed to scare me. Instead, I stood in the corridor, next to a wall, naked save for the name Philomen written on an index card. My only regret, that I didn't take the opportunity to get a photo of her.
"This is green tea,"
complains Ophelia as she slides her cup back to me with only thinly veiled disdain. It takes me a moment to break from my reverie and realize the mistake. Ophelia's usual is a chai latte. As refreshed as I felt waking up and as alert as I thought myself putting pastiche de nata in the oven this morning, it seems not all my faculties are as sharp as I would like them.
"I'll take it,"
Annabelle cuts in, pulling the teacup to her side of the counter. Both of them have listened to me recounting the previous evening's events. I did my best to leave nothing unsaid, taking advantage of a quiet morning to lay all the cards on the table. There's a handful of customers loitering about at this time, but most of my clients take their orders to go at this hour. Soon it'll be the lunch rush, but until then, we still have a teaspoon of privacy. The other two witches of Aquilo, Ophelia and Annabelle. I expected far more animosity on the former's part, her venomous ire towards the Dufour refocused on Philomen for her crimes. Like a coiled snake, however, she remains still and unreadable. Annabelle is tickled pink that she was even mentioned by the old witch, despite the disparaging remarks.
"A witch of spirits and drinks."
She delights at the description. Starved of focus and knowledge, I add, reminding her of the barb.
"Nowhere to go but up,"
she replies, smiling with undue optimism. Ophelia and I exchange a look before I turn around to prepare a fresh chai latte. Despite the unnatural upbeat attitude of my friend, there's a crumb of her enthusiasm that spills over to my plate. I hold the kettle under the faucet, filling it with warm water to boil, and I can't help marveling at the scars atop my hand. Sure, they aren't pretty. A mess of skin and flesh that looks like it was melted and then frozen back in place. But considering the state I'd allowed my wound to reach, the miracle is no less for the reminder. Maybe Philomen has a little bit of a point. What if I have been sitting on the ability to do so much more for my friends, for the community? Setting the kettle on the stove, I look over at Annabelle. She's gazing out the front window, a comfortable smile plastered on her face, as if there isn't a worry in the world. If I squint and allow my imagination to paint the scene, I can see a sparkle in her eye, a glimmer of the fey magic that robbed her of grief and pain after her mother's death. I should have been able to provide such relief. Maybe if I knew more about the Dufour recipes, I could have offered a healthier crutch for her to lean on. Instead, she sold her emotions to the woodland spirits that haunt the forest around Aquilo, a bargain that will undoubtedly lead to consequences we aren't prepared for. No need to take Philomen up on her offer either. I can't imagine anything positive coming from a mentorship with the Mad Witch. But I have the recipe book. All I need is to study it more keenly and allow myself to be a little more brazen with my experiments. All I need is to embrace the magic. Waiting for the water to boil, I study my two friends through the kitchen door. The potent smell of cinnamon and cloves wafts up to my nostrils as I pop open the jar of tea I have prepared for the rare customer that orders masala chai. There's only a handful in Aquilo, but I can proudly say that I have their eternal devotion. I make the mixture myself, a specific blend of black tea leaves, chopped ginger, ground cinnamon, and cloves, along with dried cardamom pods. Back when proving myself to Ophelia was a point of pride, I experimented over and over with the mix, drawing out the perfect balance of flavors and aromas. Aside from almond biscotti, it's probably the recipe I've fussed over the most. What would happen if I put that much energy, that much attention in the recipes from the Dufour family cookbook? What if I dared not only try more of Amelia and Elaine's recipes, but some of Madeline and Melody's, maybe even a few of Philomen's? My train of thought is interrupted by the low whistle of the kettle. I shake my head before busying myself preparing a fresh cup for Ophelia. By now, I know every detail of how she likes it, down to how many drops of milk and how many grains of sugar she prefers. "Better?" I say, sliding the latte in front of her. She barely raises her eyes from the needles in her hand, refusing to interrupt her knitting and acknowledge me.
"Unless it's another green tea,"
she says, a slight twist to the left of her lips.
"then I suppose it's a win."
"Right. Well, let me know if you need anything else." I don't expect much of an answer. She already has a half-eaten egg custard tart in front of her. The latte should keep her fed for the next hour or so. Ophelia is a tiny thing, pink skin wrapped over a minimalist frame of bones. Doesn't take much fuel to keep her going. It does tickle my pride to see her stop and consider the question a moment, though. Not many things can put a pause to her incessant knitting, but it's nice to see my cooking do the trick sometimes. Or so I thought.
"Help me kill her,"
she says, frowning despite a steady voice. The words, though softly spoken, are like a record scratch. Even Annabelle's perpetual smile is broken, replaced by a gaping mouth and an air of confusion.
"I'm sorry,"
I say, recovering from the statement.
"I'm afraid I'm all out of kill her."
The attempt at levity isn't well received, with both my friends frowning at me. I struggle to decide how else I should have answered such an outrageous demand. Incredulity might have been more appropriate reaction, but I heard Ophelia's words as clearly as I can see her in front of me.
"Or do it yourself,"
she insists, resuming her knitting with furious determination.
"Or help me find her so I can do it myself. I don't care. Whatever works for you and your conscience."
There isn't a hint of mirth in her voice. Not that Ophelia is known for her comedy. She's dead serious and somehow seems to expect we should all be on board. "Philemon?" I ask, though I can't imagine who else she might be referring to. "You think we can just up and kill Philemon?"
"Why not? She offered to mentor you. All you need to do is accept, and we can figure out a way to ambush her. If you're worried she's too powerful, you don't have to get involved, but I'll put my skill up against hers any day of the week."
Ophelia's slender fingers rage, white-knuckled, against her needles. The furious clicking and ticking of them as she pours her frustration into the work is difficult to ignore. So much of her hatred is channeled through the yarn that she misses a couple of stitches. I've never seen Ophelia missing a stitch.
"She means we can't just take a life,"
Annabelle adds, pushing her books aside to fully focus on the heavy topic at hand.
"Isn't that a step too far? We don't get to come back from something like that."
Ophelia misses another stitch. Pissed, she slams her project on the counter, causing frothed milk to spill from her cup. The timid chatter and typing on keyboards of the handful of other customers stops. Animated conversation at the counter of the Aquilo Cafe is nothing new, but loud noises in a quiet coffee shop will always bring other activities to a pause. Normally, everyone should go back to their business in a moment. Maybe it'll require the urging of a polite apology from Ophelia or myself, but the interruption shouldn't last. Unless Ophelia herself fills the silence. Which, of course, she does in earnest.
"We can't take a life?"
she demands, standing from her stool.
"Need I remind you that she's the one behind my mom's death, the death of Doris, and I can't believe I have to point this out, the death of your mother? A step too far? I'm appalled we haven't gotten to it already."
The ensuing silence is broken by the growling and mewing of Ophelia's disgruntled cat. The orange tabby pulls itself out from her bag, stretching on the counter before looking around to drink in the scene. Across the dining room, I see one of my customers, Zoe, picking up her book and gathering her jacket. She's staring us down with an embarrassed smile before tiptoeing her way out the door. The chimes bid her farewell, their song signaling to the others that the show is over. At least the outburst seems to have broken through to Annabelle a little.
"I should go,"
she stammers, grabbing at her books and stuffing them in her canvas bag with haste. One of the many buttons that decorate the green fabric falls off, bouncing on the floor tiles where William the cat jumps after it. But Annabelle doesn't bother to pick it up if she even notices that it fell. Instead, she backs away from Ophelia, gives me a furtive look, and hurries out the door. There's a short window when I expect Ophelia to call out, to stop her and apologize. But that isn't her way.
"Don't eat that,"
she admonishes her cat instead. "You'll choke on it." Ophelia bends down to pick up the pin, placing it on the counter. No more than an inch in diameter, its glossy surface reflects the large window at the front of the cafe. Annabelle's silhouette a subtle smudge moving across the light. The pin has a cartoon image of a drunk bee and the quote, "I got a good buzz going," written in bubbly, colorful letters. I remember the first time I voted in an election. It wasn't that long ago, and the stakes were relatively low, all things considered. It was a municipal election, much like the one in Aguilo, but on a scale 1,000 times bigger. The incumbent had the election all but locked up, and no one expected anything to change. Yet, as a new adult, I felt the responsibility in my hand like a freshly forged sword. I had the power of democracy at my fingertips and was itching to exercise it. It was only the day after the election, once the results were in and the expected status quo was maintained, that I realized how ugly a process the whole pageant was. The lies, the smear campaigns, the total media saturation all amount to a concert that can't be escaped. Worst of all is the ads, especially the billboards. For weeks after the election had concluded, there remained large coroplast posters everywhere in the city. These ugly reminders of the election, depicting a collection of empty-eyed politicians, remained, even from the parties who bragged about having strong environmental platforms. Walking down Claremont Street, I feel 100 printed eyes staring at me, covering me with imagined scrutiny from a dozen billboards. The placid, beatific features of Ian Greenwich watch me walk, avoiding puddles and clutching my umbrella. The rain of yesterday was promised again for today, but so far the sky has remained empty of clouds. Then there's the stern and unyielding gaze of Helen Edna, notary public. The word order, written in bold white capital letters under her face, balances between a command and a promise. Neither option feels right to me. Then again, I'd gotten used to Veronique as mayor. She had the staunch and unflappable attitude of a bureaucrat, which Helen shares, but with a more human touch. She carried the burden of caring for half the city the same way one might for a child, strict because she cared and that sort of thing. Helen, for all her competence, lacks that warmth. In her hands, Aguilo becomes a line item, a task, a problem that needs solving. Oh, she'll balance the hell out of the municipal budget, and I bet that pothole on the corner of Carver and Du Baton will get filled up within a week of her coming into office, but I can't imagine Helen taking up the sword to save the town from demons. Which leaves us only one other option.
"Miss Dufour?"
Ian. Old leader of the cloud-worshipping Pilvist cult, enjoyer of croissants and, well, not much else. "Hey," I say, far more timid than intended.
"Brought you something."
I lift a white pastry box to eye level, the unmistakable aroma of butter and pastry filling the space between us. The offering lingers in my hands for a moment as Ian raises an eyebrow, trying to read my intentions. He's still wearing his calm and welcoming smile, and his long blonde hair and braids are intact, but there's a fresh heaviness in his blue eyes, like they've gone down a few shades, or they carry an unfamiliar weight. Or maybe I'm just not used to seeing him wear a sweater and jeans.
"I'm surprised,"
he says, relieving me of the gift.
"Grateful, but surprised. Would you like to come in?"
I thank him and step into his humble abode. Well, it's not exactly humble, but it is a lot smaller than I expected a cult leader's home to be. It's a nice 2-story house with a modest front lawn and a spacious garden in the back. The design leaves no doubt that it was built in the 80s, with the sloping roof above the garage interrupted by a narrow horizontal window. While large and luxurious for its single inhabitant, it's a far cry from the size and opulence of the Black Manor. "Croissants?" he asks, peering through the foggy cellophane on the box.
6, I clarify. But I didn't want you to get bored, so there's 3 plain croissants, a chocolate croissant, one with cheese and strawberry filling, and the last is baked with a sharp cheddar shaving sprinkled on top. Little treats for all occasions. Anything else I should know about them?
We're halfway to the kitchen, the shy sunlight spilling through the open concept first floor, and I'm still stunned. At first, it's out of outrage. Me? Do anything untowards with my baking? How dare he? But then it's by how casually Ian asks. Not an accusation, but rather idle curiosity. Like he doesn't expect whatever magic I could have laced into my laminated pastry to have any malicious intent. Finally, it's how much the question makes sense coming out of his mouth.
Except for the strawberry and cheese one, they'll taste better warmed up.
He turns back and looks at me, his smile widening a little. I see a spark of lightness in his eyes come back for a moment. It's understood between us that I'm not evading the question. I'm saying a fancy no. An answer decorated with piped buttercream and candied fruits to hide the raw sponge underneath.
It feels strange to ask you, of all people, but would you care for a cup of coffee?
Not strange, I say, though I suppose it is.
And I'd love one.
Looking around, I drink in the details of his home. It's so mundane that I almost expect everything to be staged. Like I could walk behind the walls separating the kitchen from the living room and find scaffolding holding up the props and decor. The house is clean, far cleaner than any bachelor's home I've ever seen, but it's also bland, with cream-colored walls and taupe upholstery on the couches. The kitchen itself is picture perfect to a point where it could be in a magazine. White cupboard contrasting tastefully with steel gray walls and pine-colored backsplash. The only thing worth mentioning is a small collection of copper pots hanging over the stove, though I suspect they are mostly decorative. The grinding sound of an automatic coffee machine scratches my eardrums. I flex my right hand, feeling the skin stretch on top. Even with the wound I suffered, I would take coffee from the accursed machine at my cafe over quick infusion pods.
So,
Ian starts, pulling matching mugs from his cupboard.
To what do I owe the visit?
I stand at the counter, separating the little cooking area, where Ian is gathering cream and sugar, from the modest dining room with the large greenhouse windows. This could go all manner of ways. Not that I feel unsafe with Ian. He's tall, but also a little willowy. It's hard to imagine a violent bone in that tall body of his. But Aquilo has thrown 3 years' worth of surprises at me, and a fair share of them have had to do with the Pilvists in the last year. Well, I start, doing my best to strip my words of any tone of accusation.
You haven't been at the Aquilo for a while, and I was starting to worry.
He smiles again, sliding a mug in my direction.
And you're running for mayor.
Ian mixes a spoonful of sugar and a drop of milk in his own mug, all the while holding my gaze, expecting me to continue.
And apparently the Pilvists have been reborn?
His lower lip shivers a little, like a leaf caught in a gust of wind. The beatific illusion cracks, but he keeps up as much of the facade as he can.
You see,
he says, still mixing a perfectly homogeneous cup of coffee.
There's a bit of a story to that. Without the great cloud to shower with our devotion, with the mother freed from her mortal bounds, the family has been a little lost. Not everyone is equipped to have their beliefs stolen, to have their God taken away, especially when that God's existence is more a matter of fact than faith. It leaves a vacuum that most find themselves desperate to fill.
I nod, expectant. I've seen what some of the Pilvists have been up to since originally disbanding. It wasn't long before Philomene filled that void, using the cult to usher her awakening.
Well, I've found something, he says, leaning in, still stirring. I've found something worthy of the Pilvist faith.
The weight over his eyes presses down heavier than when I came in, so heavy that Ian looks like a completely different person. Worthy of all of Aquilow's faith. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubeau and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.